in athletics my entire life. I grew up in Boston, in Roxbury. I grew up in Mission Hill. Actually, my mother and father were divorced. My mother lived in the Rubber Street projects, and my father lived in the Mission Hill project. So I bounced back and forth between the two houses. A lot of, I don't know if you've ever been in projects and housing developments, and back in the early 50s, there was a migration from the South, and most of the poor blacks ended up settling into these housing developments. There's a lot of different things going on. I gravitated towards athletics. I gravitated towards playing sports. And through sports, I have, and I got a number of members of my team here, and I've told them I've been able to make a living coaching over the last 40 plus years. And the beautiful thing about that is when you get an opportunity to do something that you love, you don't feel like you're working. You feel like you're doing what you enjoy doing. And at the end of the week, somebody actually gives you a check. You a check too. And so it's a beautiful, a beautiful thing. But I lived through the riots in 1960. They had riots, especially after Martin Luther King was assassinated. I lived through the busing in Boston, and you had all of these different, Boston has changed so dramatically from that time. There were different sections of the city where you just didn't go. Different parts of Southie, different parts of Dorchester, Hyde Park, West Roxbury, Rosendale. You would not go. As a black person, you would not venture into there. Now, with gentrification, everything has changed dramatically over that period of time. I became, I fell in love with the game of basketball. Became pretty good at it. Was able to parlay that and go on to play in college, and got out of college and I got into coaching. I've had the great honor of coaching at Harvard University. I coached at Brown University. I coached at the College of the Holy Cross College. Was athletic director and coach at Mass Bay Community College, and currently having the opportunity to coach here. And one of the most endearing and important aspects of athletics, and if we have any educational administrators here, I always fight, because when budgets get cut and when money gets tight, the first two things usually that gets talked about is eliminating the arts and eliminating athletics, or cutting down those budgets. And the lessons that I've learned through athletics are so fundamentally a part of us as human beings. And it teaches so many valuable lessons that carry on throughout your life, throughout your time. It teaches. So I got white players, I got black players, I got foreign players, all of whom get an opportunity to interact and learn from each other. And they learn the most important aspect. They learn that the fundamental differences of color and religion, all that, is minute to the bond that they find in learning from each other, that they are more similar than they are different. And it breaks down the stereotypical things that one learns. And I've had the great pleasure of, matter of fact, at the end of next month, I'm going to Africa to do some clinics in Senegal. I've done them in South America, I've done them in Europe, I've done them in France, I've done them all over the country, all over the world. And again, sport breaks down a whole bunch of different barriers that seem to separate us as people. You know, I got white players, black players, and I tell them at the beginning of the year, I don't see color. I don't see color. When I look at you guys, I don't see color. As a matter of fact, nobody's white, nobody's black. You're all green to me. Everybody here is green. And then I blow the whistle and I say, I want the dark green guys down there and I want the light green guys down here. Race is important. These conversations are important. To ignore them is to put ourselves in some type of silo. We live in a world that requires that in order for us to better get along, the more we better need to understand one another. I went to, so I was in public school up until the 10th grade. My mother said, Boston public schools are awful. So she took me out of Boston public schools and I went to Catholic Memorial. Now I grew up in the projects, right? All black. And then I go to Catholic Memorial. I'm one of 4 black students in the school. White Irish Catholic school. I'm coming in. I got to take the train from Dudley to Forest Hills, get on the bus from Forest Hills, and go out to West Roxbury. Talk about culture shock. When I graduated from Catholic Memorial, I went to Dartmouth College. This Brandon Patillo. I graduated from Dartmouth College, and when I went to Dartmouth, I was one of 40 black students at a predominantly white institution. Through, you learn. You know, and the learning, that's the other thing about conversations that involve race. The learning isn't a one-way street. The learning is a two-way street. It's about white learning from blacks and blacks learning from whites and being able to consider another point of view, to being able to consider. Sometimes we're so locked into where we came from and how and what happened, and that you don't consider somebody else's point of view and where they grew up and how they perceive things and how their world turns. But through that meshes, and we get a greater understanding of each other, and we get and hopefully move forward in a bigger way. So athletes and athletics in my life has taken on a tremendous, impactful, and meaningful existence. I have revered certain athletes throughout time, and I'm going to focus in on some of them, but there's so many that have made significant impacts in America, whether it's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was the former Llewellyn Center, Kurt Flood, who changed baseball, changed the free agency. Anybody remember Texas Western? Texas Western won the NCAA championships. I believe it was in '66, but they were an all-black team that played Kentucky, the king of the hill, all-white team. And it became this, that game was. And at that time, most white universities did not recruit black players. The FCC did not have a black player. So here was Texas Western with little Bobby Joe Hill from New York and all these, and they played the mighty Adolph Rupp in Kentucky in the championship of the NCAAs, and boom, Texas Western won. And it was significant because that game, and Tom, you probably remember when USC played Alabama in football in 1970, and Alabama was all white, and USC had a number of African American and black players, and again it was pitted as white versus black, and USC won. But the significance of those victories was that all of these institutions started revisiting their admissions policies, and they started accepting and recruiting athletes of color. Again, there are so many that I'm not going to talk about that. Like the Syracuse 8. Anybody know the Syracuse 8? The Syracuse 8 were 8 black football players at the University of Syracuse University who boycotted the team because they wanted diversity on their coaching staff. There was no black coaches there. They wanted better medical treatment. They didn't get the same medical treatment that their teammates did. They wanted better access to academics. When they would get to Syracuse, they would take the black students and they would put them in basket weaving. And they would put them in non-degree paths to maintain their eligibility. So they boycotted, and then the NFL boycotted all 8 of those players that protested and did not allow them to play professional football. So athletes have, throughout time, taken on this activism, this role of activist as well as athlete. And in many cases, put themselves in jeopardy of being penalized for speaking up about social issues. John Amici, anybody know John Amici? John Amici, he was a professional basketball player, first professional basketball player to come out and say, I'm gay. By doing that, he allowed many other gay athletes that were living this life in the closet to have the opportunity to come out and be who they were, and be and feel within their skin who they were. Everybody thinks of Venus and Serena Williams as these great tennis athletes, and they are. But Venus Williams looked at the pay rate of male tennis players versus female tennis players and said, oh, why are they getting $1.5 million to the winner and the women are getting $500,000? Not right. She fought and she fought and she won. And now at all of the major championships, women get the same amount of pay as the men do. Activism, seeing something that is wrong and giving voice to it. And not being afraid of the consequences of speaking out. And back when I was a child, you got cable now, you got 1,000 different, we had 3 channels. There were 3 channels. You had channel 4, 5, and 7. Black and white, not color. Black and white, and if you didn't take the hanger and put it in there, then you wouldn't get a picture. But I'd be in my bedroom and all of a sudden I hear somebody scream, "Oh, there's somebody black on television!" What? And everybody would run in the living room. Why? Because blacks just weren't on, they weren't on sitcoms. They weren't on game shows. Unless you saw them, the only time you saw them were what? 6 o'clock news. Brandon Petillo arrested for whatever. Blah, 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 blah. You didn't see any positive images unless they were athletes. You know, Big Jim Brown. Jim Brown. It was like religion. Sunday after church, you went and you sat and you watched the Cleveland Browns play because of Big Jim Brown. Baddest boy on the planet. Big Jim Brown. But he also was an activist. Jim inspired black economic development. He later went into Los Angeles and worked with gangs members to get them to transition from gangs into being positive contributors to society. As I said, there were so many examples that I am not even going to talk about. Who knows who Charlie Sifford is? Ray, tell who's Charlie Sifford?
Charlie Sifford was a black PGA player who won, I believe, 22 times as a professional.
Say that again, I can't hear you.
He was a professional golfer in the 60s and 70s, and I think he won 22 times as a professional golfer. Most of those were kind of what we would call minor league tour wins, where he won at least 2 tournaments on the PGA Tour, and Tiger Woods called him his spiritual grandfather or something like that.
Well, if I had a chocolate kiss, I would throw it to you, man. Good job. Good job. Give that man a round of applause. Charlie Sifford was the first black professional golfer. He wasn't allowed to compete on the professional golf. And a lot of, we're talking about a lot of firsts, you know, a lot of firsts. In Tiger Woods, let's talk about Tiger Woods. If you take away Tiger Woods' personal indiscretion, I like that too. And you look at what he's done for golf, for golfers were making peanuts. That's why all these golfers love Tiger. Tiger moves the needle. Tiger has taken golf and made it into a multi-million-dollar sport, so Tiger not only raised the purses, Tiger you would never hear, like my crowd, never play golf. Golf, white man sport, white man sport. Now all his brothers are playing golf. Hey, they don't know what the hell they're doing, but they're out there digging the ground up. They're giving divots. He has increased the amount of people of color and brought them into the sport, not just in this country, worldwide. And more importantly, the Tiger Woods Learning Centers. He has created about a dozen learning centers for underprivileged kids with the latest technological advances in the classrooms. And he's not only done it in this country, he's done it worldwide. Impact. Impact into society. But again, there's so many different examples. So you've been too long. Hopefully you haven't been looking at the person on the left when you've been looking at these other characters. The first person, the impact of black athlete on society. Like Nelson Mandela. I'm sorry, sir, what's your name?
John.
So John is saying to himself, oh, Nelson Mandela never played any sports. Why the heck you got Nelson Mandela up there? Hey, John, calm down. Nelson Mandela was the first global leader to understand the power of sports and what sports could do to bring people together. He used it to battle apartheid. Mary Kay, apartheid, you know what apartheid is? You know what apartheid is? Oh, Lord have mercy. Is this a university? No, apartheid was a policy in South Africa. And apartheid is, if you break it down, it means apart from. So they had a policy of apart from, apartheid in South Africa, where whites were here and blacks were here. Apartheid. So during Nelson Mandela's career in his life, he fought social injustice. He fought social injustice, and to the point that he was arrested and imprisoned for treason, treasonous behavior. While he was in prison, he got sent to this place called Robbins Island. And while he was a prisoner, he was noticing the prisoners playing soccer. And how they was kicked. And it occurred to him that this was a way to unify. He was later freed, became president of South Africa, but he used bringing whites and blacks together on the playing field to unify and break down the vicious and ugly policy of apartheid. And I just want to, he had a very famous speech that he made. They call it the speech from the dock. He said, I fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is with this ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve, but if need be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. The power of sport. When Mary Kay shoots the ball and doesn't know if she's black or white, male or female, doesn't know that Bill Raynor, when he throws the ball, is black or white, or male or female. Sports breaks down the walls of ignorance and shows us that we, if you cut us, we bleed. The same. So Nelson Mandela is like my big number one person because he did it on a global stage. The next example of that is this person who I'm not, where you at? There you are, Martin Luther King. So, you know what he's thinking too? You know what he's thinking, man? He's thinking, Martin Luther King wasn't an athlete. And he's right. He wasn't an athlete, little punchy cat. You could probably post him up to you, take him to the goal, man. But another significant leader that understood the power of athletics, that understood the power of the athlete's voice, that understood that social movement, social change could be really affected through the voice of the black athlete. There's so many different, you know, as a matter of fact, we just recently had Martin Luther King Jr. Day, you know, and especially for these younger characters in here, you know what they look at it as? A day off. I ain't got class. I ain't got to get up. I ain't got to. And they don't have a great appreciation for the reason that they do. And the reason that many of them have the opportunities that they have. And it was just interesting to me on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, all of these athletes from all different sports, from all different walks of life, tweeted. Andrew McCutcheon, who is a baseball player, said, "A man who was killed for standing up for what he believed. Change has come, but there's more change that needs to take place." J.J. Watt, big defensive lineman, tweeted a Martin Luther King Jr. quote, "We must keep moving. If you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But by all means, keep moving." LeBron James, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." Quarterback Carson Wentz, "Love overpowers hate. Grateful for bold men like Martin Luther King Jr. that highly changed the world with love." Baseball pitcher CC Sabathia, "Thank you, Martin Luther King." Julian Edelman for the world champion New England Patriots, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." Martin Luther King's influence, what he did, clearly has penetrated and has permeated throughout not only his time but beyond. A great example and contributor to sport. "I am the greatest!" Muhammad Ali! Muhammad Ali! Oh, if you're of my generation, Muhammad Ali! Oh, baby, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Your hands can't hit what your eyes can't see. Muhammad Ali was such a polarizing figure. He was Cassius Clay. He won the Olympic gold medal, came back to his hometown of Louisville, and just faced enormous discrimination. He later became a Muslim. He joined the Nation of Islam. He changed his name to Muhammad Ali. He got drafted and refused to go into the army to fight the Vietnam War. So he got labeled a draft dodger. He said, I'm not going to go based on my religious beliefs. I'm not going to Vietnam. I'm not going to kill other brown people, as he put it. He got stripped of his boxing title at the height of his career. He spent for 3 years. But in the black community, he was the Messiah. And even though, I mean, and quite frankly, for myself personally, I wasn't and am not a proponent of the Nation of Islam. I don't believe in their philosophies and so on and so forth. But I believe in Ali and his boldness and his ability to say he was willing to give up his career. He was willing to give up based on his beliefs. And there was a picture at the end that shows up here. It's at the end of this slide. It's the summit in Cleveland. And it's such an iconic picture because it's Muhammad Ali, it's Jim Brown, it's Bill Russell, it's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, it's Kirk Flood, it's a whole bunch of different, they all came together in support of social change and social justice. Powerful, powerful. And Muhammad Ali, you can go anywhere in the world, 2G, anywhere in the world, and they know who Ali is. You might not know who LeBron is. They know who Ali is, though. So I brought this with me because this picture has sat in my office for, I don't know, a long, long time. Many, many, many years I've had this picture in my office. 2 years ago, I'm sitting in my office and the phone rings. A friend of mine says, Billy, what you doing? I said, I'm just here, what's going on? He said, you're going to be there for about 5 minutes. I said, yeah, come on by. So he comes by with John Carlos. It's John Carlos and Tommy Smith. John Carlos. John signed it for me to Billy. Ha ha. But, so, John Carlos and Tommy Smith did this protest at the 1968 Olympics. They wanted to show the world or say to the world that things ain't so great in America. Matter of fact, in that same Olympics, Lou Alcindor, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, he boycotted the Olympics. Lou said, I'm not going. There had been a shooting of a 15-year-old boy, unarmed, in Harlem, where Lou grew up, and it created race riots and so on and so forth, and he wanted to object to the treatment of blacks in America, and his form was to boycott the Olympics. Tommy, like track and field athletes didn't have the same kind of cachet and the same type of notoriety. And their goal was they were going to the Olympics, and if they won, which they did, they wanted to protest. So if you notice, they're wearing beads here, and that's to symbolize the lynchings that were happening throughout the South. You can't see their feet, but they took their shoes off when they took the podium to symbolize the poverty of a number of the black people in America. And as John said, it was a cry for freedom and for human rights. We had to be seen because we couldn't be heard. So when my friend brought John Carlos by, he only had 5 minutes to spend with me. John came into the office and we started chopping it up, and 2 hours later, I was like, man, you were supposed to be gone. But we hit it off so great, and we had such a great conversation. And you can imagine when they got back from the Olympics, how they were received. And it destroyed any kind of future, bright future for them. But they felt that it was important enough to make that stand. And I'm so glad they did. And then I got a chance to meet my man. And as a matter of fact, I got John's. Can we call? Where's my phone? Can we call John now? See if he's there. See if he answers. My man, Colin Kaepernick. You know, Colin Kaepernick, father's black, mother's white. He was adopted by white parents. He was brought up by white parents. And he has become such a polarizing figure in America. You know what? The thing that I'm most disappointed with the Colin Kaepernick story is that the narrative got changed. The media hijacked the story. Colin Kaepernick was protesting about unarmed young black men being shot and killed. And the media hijacked it to be about patriotism. He's disgracing the military and the flag and the what? That wasn't his point. Was that this needs to stop. I'm going to read you something. I wrote this, and take into account, I wrote this in 1976. In 1976, when I was a mere baby, a friend of mine who I grew up with in Mission Hill got off work, got off at midnight, get out of his car. Police mistook him for a bank robber and shot him. And in 1976, I wrote, who's policing the police? Who's policing while we sleep? The big fraternity who walk the street, they can drive into your neighborhood and mine and make it hard to distinguish just who's committing the crime. It's up against the wall. You know the position. The time has come to make them accountable to us. It's my brother, your sister, our friend, who dies from their mistakes in the end. The man in blue, he knows you. The man in blue, do you know him? The man in blue is just as true. A slip of the finger and a mistake is made while a mother makes her late son's bed. They buried him the day he was born. He just lived 26 years before we mourned. Up against the wall, you know the position. It's always him on top of me or me who has to listen. Beware, because a police state just might be near. The man in blue chasing you, the man in blue fighting you, the man in blue is just as true. I know you heard about the Indians. Maybe it could have passed you by. Then again, there's the CIA who commit worldwide homicide. Yes, there are concentration camps. Ask your Chinese brothers. Watergate might be your choice if you had your druthers. From Maine to California and everywhere in between, nervous feet tell nervous eyes, beware of the syringes. They've tipped the scale so you can't win. He saw them come, he tried to run, they shot him dead! Right in his head. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. A mistake you can't bring back. So, the police shooting unarmed young black men has been going on for a long time. Matter of fact, can I do a little thing here? Can I get my man Tucci to come up? Come on. And can I get Larry? Come here, Larry. Here. We're gonna do something here. So Tucci, here's what you're gonna do, baby. You're going to kneel. And Larry, you're gonna put your hand. So we have the playing of the national anthem, and we have little Colin Kaepernick kneeling and protesting. We have Larry standing at attention. I just want to see if this resonates with anybody. I stand to honor the promise the flag represents. You kneel because the promise has been broken. I stand to affirm my belief that all are created equally and to fight alongside you for that promise. You kneel because too few stand with you. I stand because we can be better. You kneel to remind us to be better. I stand to honor all that have fought and died so that we may be free. You kneel because not all of us are. I stand because I can. You kneel for those who can't. I stand to defend your right to kneel. You kneel to defend my right to stand. I stand because I love this country. You kneel because you love it too. Thanks, both of you.
Did you write that, or what's that from?
No, I stole it from somebody. But the great thing, regardless of where you fall on the Colin Kaepernick debate, is that it sparked dialogue. It sparked conversations. It sparked community town meetings. It sparked community relations between police and Cam, you getting up and walking out. But no. But it is 2:30? 2:20? So I got to shoot. So, but it sparked conversations. And that is, again, tremendously important that we don't ignore, and that we have the ability to have conversations that might show different opinions, that might enlighten, that might show you how somebody else thinks and feels. Althea Gibson, I'm calling on you again.
Yes, tennis player, 50s, first African American to win, looks like Wimbledon, and I think the U.S. Open as well.
Oh man, you get 2 kisses. He gets 2 kisses, baby. Right on the money. Yeah, Althea Gibson was the first black professional tennis player, and won Wimbledon and the U.S. Open. Wilma Rudolph. Yeah, the young crowd. You gonna go again?
Yeah, African American sprinter in the 50s, and I think she overcame some sort of childhood disease to become a really, well, the fastest woman in the world.
Wilma Rudolph is one of my great heroes. So I wrote a poem for Wilma Rudolph. There's a great song, Billie Holiday song. Them that got shall get, and them that's not shall lose. So the Bible says, so that still is news. Mama may have, or Papa may have, but God bless a child who's got his own. So Wilma, being the 20th of 22 children is not an easy task, especially when at age 4, stricken with scarlet fever, resulting in paralysis of the left leg. The doctor's prognosis was that she might never walk again. She disagreed in her logical way, complaining that there was too much that needed to be done for people to fuss over her. She took off her braces. By the age of 10, she was walking. God bless the child who's got her own. Occasionally, you hear a story that defies explanation, a story that reminds us that the human spirit is more powerful than the laws of science. It makes us reevaluate our pains and sorrows. It helps us to realize that all pain is relative. To say she's an inspiration is an understatement. She is the light at the end of the tunnel. Although I have never met her, she has made me a better person, and the world a better place to live in. I would feel lax not mentioning her Olympic achievements. 100-meter dash, gold medal. 200-meter dash, gold medal. The anchor of the 400-meter relay team, gold medal. Mama may have and Papa may have, but God bless the child who's got her own. Wilma went on to be the head of the New Jersey Athletic Commission for a dozen years. She served on the Governor's Council for Physical Fitness for many years, and truly an inspiration. Jesse Owens. So Jesse Owens is an iconic figure in the world history. Adolf Hitler had come into power in Germany, and he wanted to show that the Aryan race was the superior race in the world. You know what the Aryans are? You know, you gotta go to class sometimes, man. But anyway, so he built this big, beautiful stadium to showcase the magnificent talents of the Aryan race and how the whites were going to dominate in this Olympics. And here comes Jesse Owens. He did factor in Jesse. Jesse went out and won 4 Olympic gold medals. The 60, the 100, the 200 in the long jump. And Hitler refused to acknowledge him. But it not only served, it was a worldwide, of a worldwide importance. And actually it was the first Olympics, I believe, that was televised. So he was going to have this stage where the Aryan, blue-eyed, blonde hair, blue-eyed. If anybody gets a chance, Gregory Peck was in a movie that I think is The Boys from Brazil, that depicts that whole idea of the pure race, the Aryan race, that I think you would find entertaining and enjoyable. And I know we're getting late. I wanted to focus on this character here because he has really been, in recent times, the most activist in professional athletes. He has stood up many times and talked about Black Lives Matter. When the young man was, they had the video of the young man being, the police have him in in a chokehold, and you got it on tape, and his last words are, I can't breathe, before he dies. And LeBron had I Can't Breathe t-shirts that all of the NBA players were at the ESPYs. He, Carmelo Anthony, Chris Paul, and came out on stage and talked about young black men unarmed being killed, which he not only talked about it, it sparked, he went out and did town meetings. He went out and met with the police. When Trayvon Martin was killed, they took pictures with hoodies on. He has a LeBron James Foundation that sends kids to college for free. And he has been again, has carried the torch in terms of speaking up about various social issues in our country. And this, as a matter of fact, there's a picture of them at the ESPYs when they made that presentation. And it's almost kind of, so I got that picture, which is present day athletes, and then this is back in the 60s where these were the present day major athletes, from Bill Russell, Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, and Lou Alcindor, who were again taking up the cause for our country. So I think I'm going over time, but I'm going to just wind up. Thank everybody for coming, and you know, I don't know if I made sense to you or not, but again, the power of athletics and the power that, you know, even, you know, you current day athletes, you are examples. And whether you know it or not, you have young kids who are looking up to you. You have young kids who are watching you. So you have a responsibility, and you have a lineage of athletes that I've just shown you that have taken courage to allow you in many aspects to do what you do now. I hope that you carry that on. And you do. I've been around the athletes I'm talking to. I got a number of my players here. And how you represent the university. How you go out into the community and give of your time and your effort. That's impacting society. That's impacting others. And hopefully that's something that you will continue to do once you leave Framingham State University. So, hey, listen, thank you so much for your time.